Welcome to our inaugural installment of San Jose State University Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion talk series named Good Trouble, Stories of Activism and Necessary Trouble from Bay Area Leaders. We want to honor the memory of Congressman John Lewis by highlighting those who have followed his path for social justice and anti-racism work and inspire others to follow in his footsteps. His quote serves us for inspiration. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful, be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. Our first guest in this series exemplifies these wise words of Congressman John Lewis of Good Trouble. We're also celebrating Women's History Month with our kickoff interview, and our featured guest is one of the most highly recognized and impactful public leaders who gets into good trouble in so many different arenas of very pressing issues and community needs. I would like to welcome colleague and friend in the work of equity and public service, Cindy Chavez, to our program.
I am so excited to be with you, and especially with you, Kathleen. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this too. Been anticipating this very much. I'm going to talk a little bit and give a little bit of background to our viewers, so they'll know a little bit about the extensiveness of your work. You have quite a record of work and reputation on our campus as well as in the local community. I think that's really important to capture. And so if you can just bear with me, Cindy, I'm going to talk a little bit about you in the third person, even though you're here. So great. Cindy is past president of the Santa Clara County Supervisors. As a current supervisor representing District 2, she oversees a district with 500,000 residents, which includes Central, East, and South San Jose, containing many of the populations hardest hit in the terms of COVID-19. She is past chair of the $400 million Valley Transportation Authority, current chair, for the Bay Area Quality Management District, which of course has played an important role in the recent catastrophic wildfires affecting the entire region cyclically. Numerous comprehensive initiatives, including rapid rehousing programs for unhoused populations and other partnerships to address the need of our large unhoused populations and those who are already marginalized, are made especially difficult and tragic during this pandemic, and Cindy has worked on all of those issues. I want to note that the work you have led on the county's development of a homeless shelter specifically designed with the needs and support for unhoused LGBTQ youth is leading in the nation. You have numerous board appointments in which you contribute to issues of quality of life for families, elderly, and other underserved communities. You have also served in your leadership on women's rights and feminist issues, including developing the Women's Agenda with deep community involvement. In 2018, county, community, and nonprofit leaders made Santa Clara the first county in the state to expedite the processing of rape kits to be no longer than 30 days, and you were critical in that involvement. Your involvement in leadership in celebrating the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote in the U.S., coupled with the efforts to get out the vote and also to raise participation in the U.S. Census, was incredibly successful in making sure that our county will then receive adequate federal funding and representation. You most recently pulled together a Santa Clara County Hate Crimes Task Force, on which I serve as an advisory, to address hate and hate incidents in a way that coordinates and creates interagency and community-based initiatives to address the continuing rise and ever-changing nature of hate incidents, and hate crimes. There are many other things that I could mention about you, and one of the last things I want to say is that you are also a San Jose State University alum.
Yay!
So we celebrate you by inviting you to this program. And so for all of our viewers, again, I want to reintroduce Cindy Chavez, again, who is a member of the Santa Clara County Supervisors, going into her 8th year. And she is also, what you may not know is that she's past vice mayor of the City of San Jose as well.
Thank you. I am really delighted to be with you, especially on your kickoff. This is such a great opportunity for us to, just share a lot of experiences, but also, I'm just honored to get a chance to talk to you personally. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you so much, Cindy. We really appreciate your leadership and your wisdom, and certainly the ways in which you have been involved with our campus and supporting our students and our employees. So I just want to say that, you're someone who's not just involved on the masthead or, on the sort of the formal leadership as someone who just sits on an advisory board, but you're someone who organizes, persuades, you gather information, you analyze, you lead on such a wide variety of very pressing issues. And many of these are in arenas where the answers aren't easy, nor are the allies necessarily lined up out the door to help or to offer resources or support. Sometimes may even throw some roadblocks in the way. Can you talk a little bit about your own leadership path? Like, how did you come to be seen as such a necessary and important voice, ally, and leader? And I know that this path could not have been easy.
So one, I really appreciate the question. And let me just spend a minute talking about the people that I represent. So, you know, Santa Clara County is such a special place. It's one of the most diverse places in the world to live, to work, to play, to start a business, to worship, to be educated. And in addition to that, you would imagine, if you're from anywhere else in the world, that the streets of Silicon Valley are paved with gold. And what we know from living here and working here and being part of this community is that we have over 11,000 people who are homeless that live in our community. And the district I represent has been just ravaged by COVID-19 because of all kinds of inequalities, access to healthcare, access to access to housing, access to resources that other parts of our community have such easy access to. And so one of my philosophies has been that when, even the first time I ran for office, I wanted to make sure I was the best person for the job, because the need of the community that I represent is so high that I have to excel. And what that means is that we have to bring all of the tools that we can bring to bear, and we have to be willing to get better at the job every year, or we're leaving thousands and thousands and thousands of people behind.
Great. So it sounds like you are very, very driven by your own moral compass and value for public service, right? To really truly understand what that public really is and the wide breadth of need that is out there. I've heard you speak before in public, as well as being interviewed for television news or for other entities, and so you often talk with great specificity and detail about the different populations and communities that you're serving. Can you talk a little bit about, and maybe give advice to people who are interested in the type of leader positions that you've held? How important is it? Where do you get your drive to learn in great detail? Because we have many politicians who often talk very generally about groups, or sort of at the level of talking about basic needs, but not really understanding what some of the specifics are. Can you talk a little bit about the way that you approach issues, and how do you gather people around to also understand that level of detail?
You know, it's such a great question. And I just want to talk about, since it's Women's History Month, I want to focus a little bit about what I think is so wonderful about women leaders. And, I think as we think about leadership, especially now in this dominant culture, we think there's a leader and then there are followers. And I think what women have always known is that those leadership, collaboration, and the entanglements that we have with each other build strength in communities. And if you're building a community, or you're building a building or a church or whatever that thing is that you're building, you don't do that alone. And I think we are trained as we grow up to understand that, and by we I mean women, and I would say this was part of my own culture, that we're very interconnected with each other. And so I think that women bring a strength, and not just women, but this is primarily something I've seen in women in leadership, this divine sense that collaboration is a core to making change in the world. And I think that from a dominant culture perspective, that's seen as a weakness, because if you're collaborating, then you have to negotiate. It means you have to take a lot of people's opinions and their interests. But if you think about building really strong communities, that knitting together is partly how you get more and more people invested in a particular idea, a way of doing business, or a way of changing the way you do business. And so I just want to say that for women, I think it's really important that we honor our strengths and not be afraid to say, I'm not perfect. I'm going to get better at this, and this is how I'm going to do that. And let me just say something else about kind of moral compasses. I think a lot, and Kathleen, I'd be interested in your thoughts, how you're reflecting on Women's History Month and where we are in human history now.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I was really struck by growing up is that my mom was a preschool teacher, and she was a teacher's aide most of my growing up, and then went back to college. And she and I graduated from college around the same time. My mom went to school at night, and just a very, very kind, lovely woman. And my mom, the way my mom and dad treated the community is that our house was the house that kids came to after school for lemonade and to paint. And my mom put huge blocks of butcher paper in the garage and paintbrushes. And, we were the house that when there was a tragedy in our neighborhood, we're the home that people came to break bread, or people lived with us when they needed a place to stay. And I really assumed that all neighborhoods were like this, and that my parents were not unique. As I got older, I started to really understand that this idea that our interconnectedness, and that there was no disgrace in asking for help, and there was no pride in offering it.
Yeah.
That it was really part of being in a community.
Yeah, that's so insightful. When I think of my home growing up, we had numerous relatives, people who weren't quite relatives, who came through our house to live, because we had maybe a spare room, maybe it was the couch, maybe it wasn't really, we didn't have tons, but it was something that was really normative. My husband and I brought up, we were guardians to 4 children who were not our own children, because their two families needed help in bringing up these children before I ever had my own children.
Wow.
And I did also grow up thinking that this was just what people did. So it's what my parents did. So it's what I did in my generation too. And I was surprised when I went off to college and, did not see that sort of sense of connection that people had in their families in the same way that people in my neighborhood growing up here in the East Bay. Right. So I grew up here in the East Bay in California. And I know that you grew up also. I think you went to Morrow High School. Is that correct?
I did.
I graduated from Mount Eden High School, so in Hayward as well. Yeah. But I think it's really true. I think some of the values that you bring in, I do think that there is more of an effort for people, and it may not be purposeful. Maybe we need to be more purposeful, but I think there's a more of an effort to bring in and reflect on those values that you bring in, from your home life, from your upbringing, and from your cultural upbringing, your community, your neighborhood, to bear onto the work that we do. Because we are, you and I think, are very attuned to the fact that the cultural way of organizing or organizing work has really excluded, right, historically, many people that we work very hard, right, to empower. And so then it's necessary then to bring other ways of thinking in, and it is very hard to do. I think that you have done it by example, and you've also done it by structuring some of your task forces and advisories and stuff in a certain way. But I do think that for the next generation, we need to be a little bit more purposeful about that.
I think that is such a powerful point that you're raising, Kathleen, which is that, being deliberate about inclusivity is really critical. And there are lots of movements in our country that have demonstrated that. I think, the disability community, I think their whole nothing about us without us, is so right, because it changes the dynamic of government from being that of a giver of charity to a justice model, which is we recognize the value of all people. And because we do that, you structure government differently. You don't make people wait for hours at a bus stop because you value time, whether you're poor or rich. It's a different dynamic of thinking about the world. And you're right that a number of the big initiatives we brought forward, we put a commission together, we did hearings, we got input, and then we put more money into fighting domestic violence. in fact, the point you raised earlier, the example around rape, how we handle rape kits in our community, was a constituent called and said, I want to know, how are we doing in Santa Clara County? I just learned a little bit about this, and I want to make sure in Santa Clara County, that we're ahead of the game. The national standard is supposed to be 120 days that a rape kit is supposed to be tested. In most places in the country, they're not even close. Mm-hmm. We said, we're going to take that national standard, we're going to chop it down to 30 days. And in our county, every rape kit gets tested within 30 days. Wow. And that demonstrates respect both for the victim. Mm-hmm. It demonstrates that we're not going to tolerate abuse in our community. Mm-hmm. And it sets the bar for women, not just here, mm-hmm. but around the globe. And one of the responsibilities I think we have being in Silicon Valley is that we have an obligation to swing that pendulum as hard as we can in the direction of human rights, mm-hmm. so that as a global, as a global family, we're really rethinking and reprioritizing the way we address issues that affect, communities that have traditionally been underserved, or that we haven't understood, where we've been inequitable in our approach. Mm-hmm. So you're right. We put committees together. We listen to the public. We get buy-in, but we move, and we try to do all that relatively quickly.
Yes. You have moved very quickly on some issues at amazing speed. So great. Appreciate that. I know that we had talked a little bit beforehand about some of the pressures that young women leaders may put on themselves, or have been put on and socialized, right? In terms of, caretaking, in terms of appearance, not necessarily about beauty standards, but just really sort of presenting the self, in a way that we might hold higher standards for ourselves in ways that we don't really think about how that might affect our ability or willingness to take risk in leadership. Because of course we know that leadership is full of landmines, where things happen that you don't expect, or the things that you propose, no matter how hard you studied, don't work out the way that you wanted to. And so we had talked about just very briefly, but I was wondering, can you speak a little bit about these sort of gendered expectations of perfectionism what advice would you give to some young women leaders who may experience this, or have sort of a narrative about this as they're going out in the world to try to
so it's such a powerful question that you're asking, because in a way this is really about women creating permission for themselves to lead. I mean, it's not necessarily even what's being put upon us. Yeah. It's both what's out in the world, but it's also what we put upon ourselves. And I want to tell you a story. And so I remember growing up that, women, we are very conscious of how we look. We're conscious of, our value add, especially when you're a young woman, is, are you appealing? And then, can you have babies? There's a way we think about the trajectory of the life of a woman in our society that we really need to rethink. But one thing I'll say, and I'm sure every woman has had this experience, where we do not want people to comment on how we look, right? And I was running for office, and I don't know if I was already in office or if I was running for an election, but a friend of mine picked me up after an event and was driving me home, and she said, I'm just so sorry that this happened to you. I'm sorry. He said, I'm just so sorry this happened to you. And I said, what happened to me? Like, I didn't even know. And a newspaper had printed a picture of me and a colleague at a dinner, just kind of shoveling food in our mouth, and, made our faces nice and chubby. And, and it was really intended to make fun of how I looked, how my colleague looked. And that was a man, and then other people. But, for a woman being called fat or unattractive, it's like one of the, it's like, and what I didn't realize is that at the time, it was one of those things that frankly had gotten so used to kind of being pilloried in the press that it didn't have the impact on me that it frankly did on my colleague, on my friend, who said, "I'm just so sorry this happened to you." And in that moment, I had two thoughts. One is, that's not even the worst thing someone said about me probably today. But the second was, I thought, you know what? We can't normalize this. Like, it's not okay to say that's okay, right? Like, we have to be able to say, no, not appropriate. And by the way, just because I'm in public office doesn't mean I'm allowed to be your piñata. Like, that we have to still have enough boundaries with people that we say that's not appropriate behavior. But then I look at Sonia, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, and I remember seeing a cartoon of her dressed as a piñata. Mm-hmm. And here she is, a Latina in the highest court in the land, and that's in a newspaper. So, and this was, and I say this because when this incident happened to me, this was really as social media was just starting to launch. What's happening for young people now is that happened to me when I was in my mid 30s. Mm-hmm. I'm a grown woman. I'm a mother. I've had some experience in life. This is happening now to young people when they're 11, 12, 13, and 14. And it's forcing this idea of you have to be perfect. You have to show yourself in just a certain light. You have to, that all of this is some sort of a performance, and young people are being attacked before they've built up even who they are. Mm-hmm. So I think that there are two ahas for me for this. One, we're not normalizing this for adults, and we certainly have to deal with it, as we think about children. And two, the huge pressure women and girls and now more young men were already putting on themselves as they got older, starting when they're much younger. So we have to be sensitive to not normalizing this at any age, because what we're seeing is the damage it's causing. And really, I think we're stifling the next group of leaders who could be stepping onto the stage because they're too afraid to be pilloried. Mm-hmm. And that's our responsibility as adults to really change that norm and that environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Very insightful. I agree with everything you're saying. Just a little bit of I would say a topic that comes to mind when you bring this up. You had talked about the treatment of Justice Sotomayor and the depiction of her, right? As well as some of the ways in which we've seen the rhetoric, I think, in the last 4 to 10 years, I say 4 to 6, 7 years, of racial images, racist images, all kinds of, attacks on different groups, whether you're an immigrant, whether you're undocumented, whether you're disabled, all of these things that are going on. It brings to mind that, when we're in public office, we also have these intersectional identities, right? That people who are in the majority on some of these identities don't recognize, right? Can you talk a little bit about, what is it, what is your leadership path been in terms of being a well-recognized Latina in the Silicon Valley, as well as being a woman? Of course, that's an intersectional identity. You come from a background of someone your mother being a teacher. You grew up locally. You've seen a lot of different communities here. So you can talk a little bit about intersectional identities and how is that to negotiate leadership? What are some of the gifts, as well as what are some of the challenges?
Yeah, that's such a powerful, thoughtful question, because I think, my early work was in the labor movement. Mm-hmm. And, and I have been the head of the South Bay Labor Council. I've been an elected official. I've run a nonprofit. And what's interesting to me is that, again, I think we can create caricatures of each other instead of knowing each other. And so, what my reflection is that for our communities, in the Latino community, I'm not doing enough. I'm not brown enough. I'm not down enough. For the women's community, for a long time, I think there was some suspicion about, am I really going to be focused on all women or just some women? And being a labor leader, the business community at has been very concerned that I'm going to think too much about this group and not enough about this group. And the one thing there's much I appreciate about getting older. There's a lot I don't. Like I have bones I didn't know I had that now I know I have. But one thing I've really appreciated about getting older is that it's helped me see that my background in the labor movement, my being raised in a Mexican American household, my deep concern about poverty and all of those all of those identities we bring allow us to have perspective that you wouldn't have the blessing of having had you not had those experiences. And I'll just give you one example. My father, when I was growing up, my father since passed away, but he was an alcoholic. And the thing I learned from that experience was two things. One, I always want to tell young women in particular, but young people, that your home life doesn't have to be perfect for you to have value in the world. Like you don't have to come from, a two-parent household or that everybody launches differently and it's all okay. And that the perspective it gave me is that I learned that you could have a terrible disease that could definitely negatively impact you and your family and be a very good person with extremely good values. And that made me think that all of us have something to offer. And so, for my father, I don't understand, I don't have that affliction, but the challenge that I watched him suffer through, was very powerful. And it's helped me understand that when I see somebody who's an alcoholic, I don't think that person is less of a person. I can understand their struggle and want to understand how to help them. So I think that all of the things that make us who we are, if we shape them in a way that helps us become more empathetic and have deep and meaningful curiosity about others, we will ourselves become better at public service. And I don't feel like I'm a finished product, and I no longer challenge myself to be the finished product. Like I think when you're younger, you think, oh, but when I'm that age, I'm going to know everything. Or when I'm in that situation, I'm going to have it all figured out. No, to be a really, really good at your craft, you're always trying to get better. And that in this public world where people take shots at you about that, you're not down enough, you're not brown enough, you're not doing enough for the women's movement, you're not doing enough for the labor movement, you're anti-business, whatever the things that people label you, that the more you understand about your own perspective, the less that impedes your ability to act. Because if it did, oh my goodness, I'd never get out of bed, right? Because there'd be so much coming at you. You have to sort of say, okay, I understand that people are going to have their perspectives, their own perspectives. Here's mine. Let's move forward. And I'm not always right. We all make mistakes. And I think the more comfortable we are with that, the less shame there is in not being perfect. And we train people, girls especially, but now boys, that somehow we have to be perfect.
Yep.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Especially in the type of work that you do, and the
well, and you too. When you're in education, you're shaping the future. Like no pressure on you, but you're shaping the future. We're in the business of laying the foundation for the next generation to get to a place we couldn't imagine.
Yeah,
that's our job.
Absolutely, to a place that we can't imagine. We're preparing for a world that we don't know about.
That's exactly right.
So, yeah, great. I'd like to bring us towards the end by asking you, what advice would you give to someone who's a student at San Jose State, for example, and possibly even someone who's an employee who wants to get more involved in public life? to affect upon the issues that you have so passionately worked on. What general advice would you give people?
Yeah.
Encouragement?
Do it. So let me say, first thing I would say is that whatever you're passionate about, learn about it. And again, you don't have to know everything about it. And find the people or the organizations that are working on it. So if you care about animal rights, you find the group that most matches your passion and you bother them until you get a job helping them do what they do.
Mm.
At a local level, you can sign up to be on a board or a commission. And I would absolutely say, think about running for office. It's it's very fulfilling. It's hard and it's very, very, very fulfilling. But genuinely take your curiosity and just dig in, and have fun. Because the other thing is, I think our movements have to be filled with joy, like
Mm.
not drudgery and not, oh, I've got to go to another meeting. Because I if you do that, you kind of suck the life out of your own energy. But I would say just dive into what you feel passionately about. And the thing about San Jose State is that that is a campus filled with brilliant professors, amazing clubs. If you don't have the club you want, go make it. Go create it.
Absolutely.
This is the absolute time to innovate and create. And
Mhm.
when we think about disruption, it's funny, that's a very intricate part of the way people think about making change in the world in the in as it relates to making businesses and products and all of that. But it is as important in our world, in terms of public service, that we really think about what are the things we're doing now that we shouldn't be doing, that we should really change the way we're doing them. And the exciting thing about San Jose State students and young people altogether is you bring fresh eyes,
Yeah.
fresh energy,
Yeah.
good perspective, and don't be afraid to just put it out there, because we will learn from you,
Hmm.
you will learn from us, and that's how movements get moving, right? That's how change happens.
Hmm. Hmm. Very good. And I think when you look at the number of posts, different posts that you've had at different levels of organization, is an example of how many different entryways there are for people to get
Right?
involved, right?
And every
Transportation,
right. And every one of those
favorability.
boards
Yep.
have tons of committees, Kathleen,
Yep.
right? So the Valley Transportation Authority has tons of committees. The
Yep.
Air District, same.
Yep.
County of Santa Clara, City of San Jose. Just,
Yeah.
I say, jump in. And
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of folks who feel really, this kind of idea around leaning in. I think leaning in is sort of testing the waters, and all of us are going to be at different places. So sometimes it's good to lean.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's important to leap. Just
Yep.
jump.
Yep. Yep. Very good. Wonderful advice. Any last words from you? I've really enjoyed this, by the way. This has been
Me
a
too. It's so fun to
yeah.
talk to you. I am, first of all, I'm just thrilled that I got a chance to do this. And I
Yeah.
just want to say about San Jose State for a moment, if I can, that,
Oh, please.
you know, um, I think San Jose State is such an important institution. And in all the histories that have been written about Silicon Valley, and there have been many, San Jose State is often the workhorse. We've got a lot of show horses, and I'm not speaking ill of our brethren in education, but San Jose State has been filled with these really innovative, hardworking leaders. And for all of you who are students at San Jose State, don't don't miss an opportunity to take advantage of just the brilliance around you, the people that you're meeting from all over the world. Get to know them, really dive deep into what makes them, why are they here, and why are you here, and don't be afraid to really dig into the experience of being a college student. I loved being at San Jose State, and I learned so much, and I'm so grateful to the professors I had. A large part of the reason that I'm in public service had to do with an internship I had as a student at San Jose State. And so San Jose State will also always have my gratitude and always have my heart.
Oh, thank you so much. What a wonderful sentiment. We appreciate it. Love that you shout our accolades, but really, thank you for the advice to students to take advantage of their time here
Yeah,
and
it's
their
a
connection
lot of
here.
fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Well, gosh, I am so thrilled that you were our first inaugural interview for our Good Trouble program. You are certainly fitting. It's going to be a high mark to meet after this, but have enjoyed this and really appreciate the time. I know that you're really busy. But
Oh,
appreciate,
goodness. This is so fun. And Kathleen, thank you for inviting me. This was, it just, there's so much happening in the world, and really an opportunity to reflect on what we're doing and why we're doing it, and be able to share those thoughts and ideas is just exciting. And I hope when you do this, if you can leave our my email and website, so if young people want to figure out that are here what they can do next, I'd love to be part of helping that happen for them.
We will absolutely do that. And I do want to share that it was our ODEI staff that decided on you as our.
Oh, thank you. We'll give them all a big
yeah
big hug.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.